It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to your Feel Good Breakfast Show, Expresso on SABC3. The one and only JP Sebastian joining us in studio as we take a look at the latest movie trailers that's just been released. And we're touching on one that was actually quite relevant, that it was in my news when I was doing the weather about the ice, like, you know, the world is melting.
Yes, it is. The documentary is called Meltdown. Tell you what, I'll start with some hard facts because I refute the claim that that wasn't to do with climate change. Because like you said, it was,
that was in my bulletin.
40 billion cubic tons in one decade, up to 250 billion cubic tons.
That's scary.
Yeah. The documentary is based around Greenland. And just there, if we take the 2 decades of the 1990s and now, it has an average yearly loss of ice in the 1990s of 54 billion cubic tons per year. And then by this decade, it's 234 billion cubic tons. If you tell me that there is no upward correlation between the drag of time of industrialism and climate change, then we need a new news bulletin. Anyway, so Lynn Davis and Tony Lazarovitz are two people who come together for this documentary, which is sort of an intimate one-on-one between a famous photographer that she is of icebergs. Basically, her favorite animal that is going extinct. These might be the last she sees of them.
Oh my God.
And she's taken such beautiful photographs of them her whole life, and now she's saying goodbye. And the scientist from a Yale department, Yale University, which has to focus on how do we communicate climate change. So the science behind human behaviors towards stuff like climate change. So obviously the whole documentary is how do we help the facts hit home with the public.
I know, because I'm looking at this. It's been on my bucket list to travel and experience one where I'm on a kayak and there's a giant ice glacier in front of me. Like, that's been on my bucket list.
You might have to
cannot melt before the pandemic.
You might have to put a kayak in your living room and watch Meltdown at this rate. So it's if an inconvenient truth couldn't maybe hit home the way we would have hoped, remember the one with Al Gore, then we need to try all different ways to try and communicate this as possible. The iceberg that you were mentioning, by the way, which fell off the Brunt ice shelf in Antarctica.
A74.
That's the name, the designation. Friday last week was the first time since cracks were starting to notice, scientists noticed cracks expanding in 2012. And now 9 years later, an iceberg the size of both the northern and southern suburbs in Cape Town is let loose, and it's likely that within the next few weeks, we will see another. So, yeah, this is strictly down to man-made climate change, and hopefully this documentary can drive some sort of point home. I don't know if we can do this alone as individual, like, you know, viewers, but maybe if it stirs up some sort of activism and fire under people's bums to do something about the meltdown, then maybe that's a good thing.
I can't wait to see it, because just seeing on the little snippets we've had on the screen, it really looks beautiful, the footage.
Yeah, and mournful then in a way too.
Date?
Nothing in South Africa just yet, but you know, you might find this on a streaming service in future. Let's just hope that we can all get our doggy paddle down by then.
There we go. Well, let's move on to the next movie trailer that we're unpacking today, My Darling Supermarket.
And it is also a documentary and, well, about chain stores and supermarkets, which unfortunately are one of the causes of climate change. But this is a look at the day-to-day life of, well, what we've come to designate as essential workers. Some of you who are watching, by the way, thank you very much. People who work cash registers and stock shelves, and people who do the kind of work that you're about to see in this documentary, which looks beautifully shot. It is so magnificently filmed and such a tender telling of lives that some people, maybe even employees yourselves, take for granted, that you do these things that are benign. It feels day to day, it feels repetitive, but the documentary gives them the microphone, and you find that you know, these folks who work these kinds of jobs have fascinating, deep philosophical thoughts like anyone else.
Yes.
And surprise, surprise, they're human like anyone else. But pervading throughout this footage is quite interesting. There's always a sense of, say, the CCTV security camera. So there's a sense of surveillance constantly, while at the same time people are going, no, I do the same thing every day. You know, I try to keep my nose down and be a good boy or good girl or whatever. All that aside, looks beautifully filmed. It might be quite meditative and make us think a lot more about people who, like I said, we can take for granted during the pandemic especially. And I look forward to this one a lot.
And you know what always fascinates me is when people go to the store and they don't greet the cash register.
It's a person.
And I'm like, yeah, she's human. Like, say hello.
And so, you know, your senior, like, she's finding out, wait, does he have a crush on me? Like, about the other employee, the one dude's a scoundrel and he has all sorts of, like, just here in the Expresso workplace, we have, you know, some guy who spins yarns and stories. Prosper, it's you who keeps trying to tell me about the Tokoloshi. And everyone's just so colorful and so fascinating. There's one guy who dresses up like his favorite anime, and no one asks questions about it. They just let him do his thing. There he is.
Oh, no.
So, looks like a really beautiful, tender human portrait of people who are often just thought of as cogs in the machine.
Well, I love this because, you know, there's something very fascinating about people watching. And I have to say, like, my favorite place to people watch is at the airport. But since we can't do that, it's now at the grocery store. And it's so funny, or the supermarket.
Okay, so no stalkers for Zoe, but Zoe's allowed to stalk other people, please.
Not stalking, it's called people watching. There's a difference between following the person and just watching them, observing their behavior.
Elaborate, please, because
No,
I'm not buying this.
No. People watching is real. That's where we get most of our radio content. So there we go.
Scary.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to it. Is there a release date for this one?
So no, not just yet, but it looks so stylish and so slick and so beautiful. You're definitely going to find it that is picked up by, again, one of the streaming services, especially during the pandemic. No one's going to big screen as much, but I look forward to seeing this one. You will see it at next year's Oscars with footage as beautiful as this.
That is amazing. Well, JP Sebastian's not going anywhere. He's still going to hang out with us on your Feel Good Breakfast show.
Climate change is real, and it's man-made.